How's it going, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz. In today's video, we're going to be going over the best Pokemon to Lucky Trade. Lucky Trades are some of the best ways to get hundos and even shundos in Pokemon GO. With an IV floor of 12, 12, 12, you have a 1 out of 64 chance of it actually turning into a 100% IV Pokemon. The only problem is figuring out what to actually trade. Everybody plays this game differently, and so it can be quite challenging sometimes. Given that I've run into this problem so many times with my own Lucky Friend trades, I figured making a video would be not only helpful for myself, but also a lot of you guys out there as well. So timestamps have been included on this video for quick reference, and for any veteran players watching this right now, let us know in the comment section down below what you frequently Lucky Trade in your own local communities. So we're going to start things off with a bang. We're going to go over the best Lucky Trade Pokemon, and in my opinion, these are Pokemon that you can pretty much go with, and it should always be a good option. The first Pokemon that we're going to go over is going to be Necrozma, which was just recently added in Pokemon GO last summer during GO Fest, so it's only been out for like less than a year. Now this Pokemon is super good, right? Because once you actually fuse it together to either get Duskmane or Dawnwings, those two Pokemon are the best in their respective typings, so ideally you want to get multiple of these if possible. Now unfortunately, Necrozma with a good IV spread isn't going to be the only requirement here. You also need to have 1000 fusion energy respectively to either go into Dawnwings or Duskmane, and you also need to have either Solgaleo or Lunala to fuse them together as well. Which means, yeah, it's going to be kind of problematic, right? Because a lot of players probably don't have access to multiple Cosmog, and that is expected. We haven't really gotten it featured through too many events. But the thing is, getting a good IV spread on Necrozma takes time, man. I did about 50 raids during GO Fest last year, and my best one wasn't even 96% IV. But thankfully, I kept on trading them, and now I have a Lucky Hundo and two 96% IVs with 15 attack. So in my opinion, I think Necrozma is going to be an excellent option. I mean, even if you're still missing that Cosmog to either evolve it into Solgaleo or Lunala, getting a good IV spread on Necrozma is going to take you some time. Now the same could also be said with Kurum, which was just recently featured during the Unova Tour in Pokemon GO. Now unlike Necrozma, where you don't need to actually have any exclusive movesets, Kurum does need to have the legacy moveset Glaciate. Otherwise, you won't end up getting Ice Burn or Freeze Shock, which is going to be their new movesets when you fuse them together to either get White Kurum or Black Kurum. Now, the upside here is that Kurum fuses together with either Reshiram for White Kurum or Zekrom to get Black Kurum. So getting these Pokemon in their fusion forms is going to be a little bit easier in that regard, but it's still going to cost you 1000 energy just like Necrozma would. So for that reason, I mean, unless you did a bunch of raids during the rotation when we had them during the Unova Tour, you're probably going to have to wait until we get them back in raids at some point, which is eventually going to happen. We just don't really know when. Could be GO Fest, could be December, could be next year, could be 3 years from now. We really have no idea. But in the meantime, if you didn't get yourself some good IV spreads on Kurum, I mean, most people probably have Kurum with Glaciate from this most recent event. I mean, it was like a month ago at this point. So, I mean, trading for these right now, especially with Glaciate on those Pokemon, because I guarantee when we get Kurum again in raids, it's probably not going to have Glaciate. I'm just being honest here. Niantic typically does that, and I guess Scopely is going to be doing that now since they just got sold. The main point that I'm trying to make here, though, is that you definitely have a lot of opportunity right now since Kurum was just recently featured in raid battles, especially with Glaciate. Definitely go through and try and trade these as much as possible. Try to secure some good IV spreads, maybe even some with the backgrounds if you like those. But overall, I would say you want to focus the most on getting multiple White Kurum and getting the best possible IV spread for Black Kurum, which you can then use in Master League. So I think if you can't think of anything else to trade, these two options are going to be solid, and you're going to want multiple good IV spreads. So when in doubt, go with Necrozma or Kurum. The next Pokemon I want to talk about that's going to be really good to Lucky Trade is going to be Dynamax Beldum. Now I totally understand not everybody is going to be into the Dynamax system, but if you ever change your mind, this Pokemon right here, when evolved to Metagross, is one of the best Dynamax Pokemon in the game. It's a really good tank, it's a solid healer, and it's also going to be a great attacker to have. You're most likely going to get better Gigantamax Pokemon in the future, but Dynamax Beldum is actually a Pokemon that you can solo yourself in these Dynamax raid battles. I actually have a full guide video which goes over how to do it with just level 20 Pokemon. Now unfortunately in Pokemon GO we can only do one special trade a day, so Pokemon like this are really good because there's not that many of them that are actually worth doing Lucky Trades for. Like I mentioned earlier, even if you're not that interested in max battles currently, if you ever change your mind, and trust me, there's a good chance you probably will in the future, you're going to be really glad you had this Pokemon. Now since we're on the topic of Dynamax Pokemon, we should probably also talk about Gigantamax Pokemon, which in my opinion are some of the best Lucky Trade Pokemon you guys can go with right now. Even if the IV spread isn't that good, guys, it really doesn't matter that much for these Gigantamax, or sorry, these max battles. and that's because it's mainly just focused on the max moves. I mean, yes, the IVs do matter to an extent, but you mainly just want to focus on upgrading those max moves. Ideally, powering them up to about level 30 is recommended, and that's actually what I've done for the most part. I have spent minimal resources on my max Pokemon, guys. Like, I lucky trade them, then I power them up, and then I upgrade the max moves. And it does cost a lot of candy, don't get me wrong, but in terms of Stardust, extremely minimal. Basically just focus on getting all these Pokemon in their lucky variants unless you happen to already have a good IV spread for them. But I guarantee a lot of people out there right now probably didn't have the community to actually get these done, which is why it makes us such a good Pokemon to lucky trade in 2025. The next type of Pokemon I want to go over is going to be a really common one that you guys can most likely get done with any type of player in Pokemon GO, and that's going to be a Community Day Shiny. Now, these have an increased shiny rate during their respective calm days at 1 out of 25. So if you're not really sure what you want, but you know that you want to get a lucky shiny Pokemon from this lucky trade, then definitely go with the calm day shiny. I guarantee it's going to be easy for anybody to fill. Most players out there, even the most casual players out there, probably have these shinies. And guys, a lot of times they're actually really good too. Like we just recently had Ralts as a calm day classic Pokemon in January. That Pokemon is amazing as Gardevoir. Not to mention, it's probably one of my favorite shinies in the entire Pokemon franchise, but that's my point. Like, you can essentially get some really good Pokemon from these Calm Day shinies, and guess what? Most people probably end up having them. The same could also be said for Raid Day shinies, Hatch Day shinies. Anything that has a boosted shiny rate is typically going to be much easier to trade, opposed to like a full-on shiny. Once again, the idea here is that you want to avoid the complication of a lucky trade. If you can make it a really simple process, it's going to be great for both parties. Now, finally, the last two Pokemon I want to go over is going to be Origin Dialga and Origin Palkia with their exclusive Adventure Effect movesets. These were only available from raids, guys, which means you can't actually Elite TM to get them, so the only way to get them if you didn't get them from raid battles is going to be from trades. Roar of Time on Dialga is going to pause the duration for your Lucky Egg, Incense, and even Star Pieces by 6 minutes, or 6-minute increments I should say. And then Origin Palkia with Spatial Rend is going to extend the radius of how many Pokemon you guys can catch, which is really good when you're trying to grind super hard for a certain type of Pokemon or for a shiny during an event. It's an amazing bonus. Not to mention, each of these Pokemon individually are going to be great Dragon type attackers, and also they're going to have some strong relevance in the Open Master League. I guarantee if you end up getting a good IV spread and you power this thing up, you're going to use it all the time. I actually ended up getting some really good IV spreads from raid battles, so I didn't have to lucky trade for mine. Those 7 types of Pokemon are going to be my top recommendations for lucky trades. Like, when in doubt, to go with any of these options and you guys should be solid. We are just getting started though, because there are so many other types of Pokemon you guys can actually lucky trade that are probably going to be really good. Let's go over legendary Pokemon next. So we have 14 Pokemon that I want to talk about right now, and pretty much all of them have legacy movesets, so you ideally do want to trade with these movesets. But if you don't, you know, that's okay too, because you can always use an Elite TM to get them as well. And the best way to get Elite TMs is going to be from Go Battle League, at least if you want to get them for free. I actually have a full video going over the best Pokemon to Elite TM, and even though we're going to cover a lot of them in this video, I strongly recommend watching that video as well. I'll leave a link down below. Alright, so as far as the best legendary Pokemon you guys should be lucky trading, the first one is going to be Groudon with Precipice Blades. Groudon is going to have amazing relevance in the Open Master League as a raid attacker, as a ground type raid attacker I should say, and also in rocket battles. You could also give it the other legacy moveset Fire Punch if you want to unlock the secondary charge move, and this thing is phenomenal. Everywhere you want to use it, guys, is going to be a good option. So whether it has Precipice Blades or Fire Punch before you trade it is kind of irrelevant. You can always Elite TM to get those movesets later. So out of all the legendary Pokemon you guys could trade, Groudon with Precipice Blades is going to be one of the top tier picks. Now, the same could also be said for Kyogre with Origin Pulse. This Pokemon is excellent, but if you don't happen to have Origin Pulse, you could definitely get away using Surf. I think that moveset is also really good to have, so not having Origin Pulse, not the end of the world. I think Groudon with Precipice Blades definitely makes a bigger impact if I had to use an Elite TM. But Kyogre with Origin Pulse, or just Kyogre by itself, great for the Master League, great as a Water-type attacker in the Raid/Gym meta. Also, Primal Kyogre, if you do have the energy, that is the best Water-type attacker in the game. Now, following that, to conclude the trio, we're going to have Rayquaza, which does need a Meteorite for Dragon Ascent. This has only been available during certain events in Pokemon GO, so if you don't actually have any Meteorites, you're going to have to wait until we get another event with Rayquaza. But like I said, guys, with all these Pokemon, you ideally want to get a good IV spread. That's going to take some time, so lucky trading this now, trying to get a better IV spread, something with 15 attack, something above 90% IV, that's going to be what you want to look for. Now, we talked about Kyurem earlier, right? Fusing together with Reshiram and Zekrom. Well, actually, these Pokemon by themselves are great to have. For Reshiram, you do want to have Fusion Flare, and then for Zekrom, you do want to have Fusion Bolt. Reshiram is going to be a top Fire type attacker, and Zekrom is going to be a top Electric type attacker. If you don't end up getting a good IV spread, you could always save that for the fusion forms because everything is based on Kurim. Definitely recommend fusing a bad IV spread, and then if you happen to get a good IV spread, keep them as standalone Pokemon. The next Pokemon I want to talk about are going to be Xerneas and Yveltal. So for Xerneas, you want to have the Legacy Fast move Geomancy, and then for Yveltal, you want to have the Legacy Charge move Oblivion Wing. For Xerneas, it's going to be one of the top Fairy type attackers in the game, and then for Yveltal, it's going to be one of the top Flying type attackers in the game. If you have Rayquaza with Dragon Ascend, this is going to be significantly better, so I wouldn't worry about Yveltal as much, but keep in mind, both Xerneas and Yveltal also have relevance in the Open Master League, pretty good relevance right now, so if you happen to get the Hundo or like a really good IV spread like 96-98% IV with 15 attack, it is definitely going to be worth investing into. We also have two Pokemon that were recently featured during the Univitor. That's going to be Thundurus Therian with Wild Bolt Storm, a really good Electric type attacker, and Landorus Therian form with Sandsear Storm, a really good Ground type attacker. Now keep in mind, if you already have a Zekrom with Fusion Bolt that's really good, you don't have to worry about Thundurus as much, and the same can be said if you already have Groudon with Precipice Blades. I wouldn't worry about Landorus as much. But both of these Pokemon also have Master League relevance, so if you end up getting a really good IV spread, you can definitely use them in both the Raid/Gym meta as well as for PvP. Now we still have a few more options to go over. The next one is going to be Mewtwo with Psystrike. If you can get Psystrike, this is going to be a massive upgrade compared to Psychic on Mewtwo. And I guarantee a lot of people probably do have this, because Mewtwo is probably one of the most desired Pokemon in Pokemon GO. Although, to be fair, we actually haven't had regular Mewtwo available in raids for some time now. We've had Shadow Mewtwo come back a few times, which is going to be a great Pokemon to build by itself, but regular Mewtwo, I mean, maybe not as much. You can always trade for the purified version. I'm sure plenty of people can just purify their Shadow Mewtwo and then trade that over, but unless you have a bunch of extras, I probably wouldn't recommend doing that. At the end of the day, though, if you guys do happen to have those extra Mewtwo with Psystrike, going to be an excellent Pokemon. Even without it, guys, you can still get away using Psychic. Now, as far as why you would want Mewtwo, aside from Gen 1 nostalgia, it is going to be the best Psychic-type attacker in the game. It's going to be really good to have in Master League, and it's also going to be solid to use against Rocket Grunts with Confusion. That thing annihilates anything that's going to be weak to Psychic. The next Pokemon is going to be Giratina with Shadow Force. Now, this could be the Altered version or the Origin version. Both are going to be good to Lucky Trade. I would have to say the Giratina Origin form is going to be the more desirable Pokemon because you can use that in the Raid/Gym meta, whereas Giratina Altered is mainly just going to be used for PvP. Next up, we have the best fighting type attacker in the game, which is going to be Terrakion with Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword is incredibly important for Terrakion. It literally cannot be used as a fighting type attacker without this moveset, so if you wanted to give anything an Elite TM, this is definitely one of the top picks. The next two Pokemon aren't going to have any legacy movesets, and they're going to be Zacian in its hero form and Enamorus Incarnate. Now, Zacian is mainly just used as a Master League Pokemon, and keep in mind that this is probably going to get outclassed very soon, and the reason I say that is because Crowned Form Zacian, its other form, which is a much better form, is going to be released during Go Fest this year, so in about a few months. Now this is going to take Zacian to the next level, but given that this Pokemon is most likely going to be a form change, Lucky Trading this Pokemon right now is going to be a really solid option. Once again, you don't need to have any legacy movesets for regular Zacian in its hero form, just make sure to get a good IV spread and you should be good to go for Go Fest. And then finally, Enamorus Incarnate, no shiny form, no legacy moveset just yet. It might get one in the future, but as of right now, this is one of the best fairy type attackers in the game, even above Gardevoir. So that's saying something because Gardevoir was like the top pick for a long time, especially Shadow Gardevoir. But Enamorus Incarnate, you can essentially get the same thing, and then as a lucky Pokemon, costs half the Stardust. This is definitely one Pokemon I need to personally keep trading for because I didn't get anything good from raid battles. And that pretty much covers all the legendary Pokemon that I felt were worthy of lucky trading. I think those are the best ones you guys can lucky trade right now in Pokemon Go. If you felt like I missed anything, let me know in the comment section down below. But as far as saving Stardust and just getting like really good IV spreads, I think all of these are going to be solid options to go with. Next up, we're going to go over shiny Pokemon. Now obviously any shiny Pokemon you're missing for your collection would be the best one to trade. And so if you do have a list, that's something you guys could show to your trade partner. But if not, these following Pokemon are going to be great shinies that honestly I think most players in the game are probably going to be happy with. The first Pokemon we're going to go over is a fan favorite that's going to be shiny Charmander. Now when evolved to Charizard, guys, you need to have the exclusive legacy moveset Blast Burn. You can always use an Elite TM for that, it's not a big deal, but Mega Charizard Y, best flying type attacker in the game. Charizard in general is, again, like a fan favorite Pokemon. It's going to be really, really fun to have. It also is a black shiny that just looks amazing, so having a Shundo of this or like a really good IV spread is going to be something I think a lot of players probably want to get their hands on. The next Pokemon is going to be Shiny Chansey, which is going to be one of the best gym defenders in the entire game. I think one of my favorite Pokemons to flex in gyms is my Shiny Chansey with the flower crown that I got from one of my close friends. I love that. I maxed it out to level 50. It is an amazing gym defender. Chansey also had a community day last year in 2024, so there's a good chance a lot of people probably have extras of this, and they probably don't value it that much. Like, I've seen a lot of people say that they don't care that much about their Chansey, and I'm just like, you're crazy because Chansey is the best gym defender. The next Pokemon is going to be Shiny Eevee, and that's because it has multiple evolutions. I mean, you have Vaporeon, Flareon, Jolteon, Espeon, Umbreon, Glaceon, Leafeon, and then finally Sylveon. You have so many different Eevee forms, and if you want to have all the shiny forms, well, you gotta have multiple good shiny Eevee, right? Or at least just multiple shiny Eevee. Gotta be a great Pokemon all around, guys, and especially if you guys haven't used the name trick yet, well, if you end up getting a really good IV spread, I would highly recommend using that on Sylveon. It is probably the most difficult of the evolutions to evolve, and the most time consuming. Next up, we have one of my personal favorites, and one that was also featured very recently in Pokemon GO during the Com Day Classic, and that's going to be Shiny Ralts. It is by far my favorite Pokemon to hunt in every game that it's available in. I have always gone for a Shiny Gardevoir, and here is no exception. But keep in mind, guys, Shiny Gardevoir, or just Gardevoir by itself, is a great Fairy-type attacker to have. Not to mention, it has a Mega Evolution as well. So yes, I am definitely a bit biased here, but I just think the Shiny form, this entire Shiny Evolution line just looks fantastic, and same thing with the Mega form. Following that, we have Shiny Riolu, which is going to be an egg-exclusive Pokemon, and then we also have Shiny Lucario, its evolution. It is definitely a fan favorite Pokemon. I mean, everyone I talk to really likes Shiny Lucario. I believe for Shiny Riolu, it had a hatch day at one point where the Shiny rates were 1 out of 10, and then the same thing for Mega Lucario. When it had that raid day, the Shiny rates were also 1 out of 10. So, I mean, yes, in the past, this Pokemon was quite rare, but nowadays, I'm not going to say it's common, but I think a lot more people actually have access to it. And so if you don't have a good one yet, definitely a great Pokemon to Lucky Trade. The next Pokemon I want to talk about is going to be Shiny Melton, which is only available during certain events. You can technically open Melton boxes anytime you want to, but the shiny form is only available during very specific events of Pokemon GO. Melmetal is an amazing Pokemon to use in Rocket Battles as well as Master League. It is a solid option, and it's also really accessible. It's probably the easiest Pokemon to get to level 50, and the reason for that is because Melton is actually considered a mythical Pokemon, but it's one exception where you can actually trade it. This means that when you're actually hunting for it from those Melton boxes, if you're above level 31, you're going to get 3 guaranteed extra large candy every single time you catch one, which means in about 1 or 2 boxes, you can have the entire amount to power it up to level 50. Most Pokemon in game take a long time to actually grind out the extra large candy for level 50. Melton, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite, so if you can get a really good IV spread for your shiny, I mean, it's going to be an easy level 50 Pokemon for sure. Not to mention, level 47 I think requires you to power up 3 level 50 Pokemon. This can definitely be one of them. The next Pokemon is going to be Shiny Shuckle. So we talked about Shiny Chansey earlier as one of the best gym defenders. Well, Shiny Shuckle is also going to be an amazing gym defender. And you're probably thinking, why? I mean, that Pokemon doesn't even reach like 500 CP. Why is it so good? Well, Shiny Shuckle actually has the #1 defense stat in the entire game. Combined together with its amazing typing of Bug and Rock, I mean, that combination is solid. And so when it comes down to it, Shiny Shuckle next to Shiny Chansey is my second best gym defender that I like dropping gyms. Nobody really expects Shuckle to be that good. I mean, looking at it, you wouldn't really think it was, right? But it's actually one of the best. And if you're sleeping on it, well, I mean, that's on you. Finally, the last one I want to go over is going to be any shiny Pokemon with a special background. I think these are incredibly rare in Pokemon GO, and I totally understand not everybody cares that much about special backgrounds in-game. That's perfectly fine, but if you do, just know that if you actually have a shiny with a special background, that is one of the rarest shiny Pokemon in the entire game. And there are some hardcore collectors out there who will give you some really rare stuff for these. We talked about legendary Pokemon, we talked about shiny Pokemon, but is there anything else you guys should focus on? And yes, there's actually a couple other rare Pokemon I want to mention. The first one is going to be Shroodle, which is going to be a new rare Pokemon featured from 12km eggs. Typically, the newest of these 12km rare Pokemon tends to be like really difficult to get. And as of right now, there's a lot of people who do not have this yet. I happened to hatch one, and I was actually able to negotiate a really good trade. Even though it's my only one, I don't really care that much about this Pokemon, but because one of my friends is trying to complete their Lucky Pokedex, I mean, this made it such a good trade bait Pokemon. They really want it, they have been struggling to get it, and for me it's like, well, I don't really care that much about it, so yeah, by all means, go ahead and take it. And the same could be said for the next Pokemon, which is the previous rare Pokemon from 12 Kilometer Eggs. That's going to be Varoom. At this point, more people probably have access to this one. I've actually hatched a few myself, but there are definitely still people who ask me for this one for lucky trades. So I'm not going to recommend this one as much, but if you still need to get it, Charcadet is going to be another good Pokemon. The next Pokemon is going to be the rare pseudo-legendary Pokemon available from Generation 9. That's going to be Frigibax. Now, when evolved to its final stage form, this was actually a really solid Ice-type attacker before White Kyurem got added into the game. So if you already have a couple White Kyurem, I mean, don't worry about this one too much, but if you want to have a really cool Ice-type dragon Pokemon, then Frigibax is going to be a great Pokemon to lucky trade. Also, it's going to be a non-special trade, so there is that. The same could also be said for the Gen 8 pseudo-legendary Pokemon, which is going to be Dreepy. This evolves all the way up into Dragapult. Now, this is exclusively used as a Dragon-type Pokemon. It's not even that good, if I'm being honest here, but just given the rarity of it, you might want to lucky trade for at least one of these. We also have the rare Fairy-type Pokemon Hatena, which evolves all the way up into Hatterene. Now, this Pokemon isn't as good as Gardevoir, but just given its rarity, you might want to have something different in your Fairy-type lineup. This is going to be a great Pokemon to lucky trade as well. But I will say, you're probably going to get more bang for your buck with the Namorous Incarnate. The next three Pokemon I'm going to go over are very specific to their situation, so just keep in mind you're probably not going to be able to do this, but if you can, I would strongly recommend it. The first one is going to be Poipole, which was the seasonal Ultra Beast exclusive Pokemon. When I initially got my Poipole, it was really awful IVs, but for some reason they actually allowed us to trade this Pokemon, so I lucky traded this with one of my friends. We did Poipole for Poipole, and ended up coming out pretty good. Naganadel, its evolution form, is a decent poison-type attacker in the overall meta. It's not going to be as good as Nalego, but at the end of the day, if you want to have some variety, this Pokemon is going to be great to build, just for raids, not really for PvP. The next Pokemon I'm going to recommend is going to be Cosmog, the rare legendary fusion Pokemon. Now, we talked about this earlier with Necrozma, right? Now, if you happen to get close to the Hundo, though, I would actually not fuse it together with Necrozma, right? Because everything is going to be based on the IVs for Necrozma, not so much on Solgaleo or Lunala. So if you end up getting a Hundo or like a 98% IV, I would keep that and use it as a Solgaleo because that by itself is really good in the Open Master League. Now, of course, if the IVs are trash, which let's be honest, they're probably going to be, that's okay. You can evolve it either into Solgaleo or Lunala, fuse it together with Necrozma to get either Duskmane or Dawnwings, and boom, now you have one of the best Steel-type attackers in the game or one of the best Ghost-type attackers in the game. Now finally, our last Pokemon, arguably one of the rarest Pokemon or most desirable Pokemon that people want. I'm not entirely sure why, I think it's just, you know, genuine nostalgia for sure, but that Pokemon is going to be Armored Mewtwo. Now this isn't actually that good in raids or for PvP. I mean, it's kind of good in PvP in the Open Ultra League, but for raid battles, regular Mewtwo is going to be much better. For some reason, the stats on Armored Mewtwo are different than regular Mewtwo. I think that's because with the armor on, it's not as powerful, right? Like in the movies, I think it was what they used to control Mewtwo. And anyways, point being, Armored Mewtwo is one of the rarest Pokemon in Pokemon GO. It was only released once, I believe back in like 2018. And so if you happen to grab that, just know you can negotiate for a lot of Pokemon just with this guy. Now we also have Mega Pokemon, which most of the Mega Pokemon do actually have meta relevance in the raid/gym meta, but some of them don't. If you want to actually know which are going to be the best ones to focus on and power up, then check out this video next.